So we're going to go through our primary and secondary sources notes today. You can either, while we're on NTI, you can either write your notes or you can type them up on Google Docs. Either way is fine. If you type them on Google Docs, I'd like for you to share those with me though, but it's totally up to you. So primary and secondary sources, this is a very, very important foundation for social studies. You actually know what primary and secondary sources are. You just may have never called them that. You've used them in other classes, like especially Miss McCoy's class, when you read things like the Diary of Anne Frank. So we're going to sort of put some definitions out here for you so that way you really understand what these things are, because you have to know what primary and secondary sources are in order to successfully learn about social studies, because that's all it is. It uses primary and secondary sources all the time. So first, primary sources. And remember, you can pause this video if you want to copy down the notes, or you can look at the copy that I've put on Google Classroom, the Google Classroom page. Either way you want to do it. My little box here is covering up some words here. So first, primary sources, they are first-hand accounts of history. They're original documents, even copies of those documents. As long as it's from the event or a particular time period, then that's a primary source. So if you have, I put this in here, even copies, because I have had in the past people get really confused, because I will say, oh, whenever I ask you about these later, I'll say, if I give you a copy of the Constitution or the copy of the Pledge of Allegiance that's up here on my wall, people would say, oh, that's a secondary source. But no, that's not. Even if as long as it's the original document, it doesn't matter how many times it's been copied, as long as it's still what it originally was, like the Constitution. If I have a copy of that, it's still a Constitution. So the primary source is that original document. Here's a bunch of examples. Letters or diaries, government documents like the Constitution, even copies, photos or artwork, stamps, money, clothes, things like that are primary sources. They are from a certain time period. If you have stamps, those usually have different like pictures based on the year. So a lot of people collect stamps because of that. A government document, that's the original. A letter or a diary, that is from that person. So that has to be a primary source. Here's some more examples. This is a newspaper headline, or this is actually the newspaper of the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. This newspaper is a primary source because that was printed the day or that year. It tells you right here, the year, 1963. So this is a primary source. This is from that time period. An autobiography of Benjamin Franklin is a primary source because an autobiography is a biography, a story about somebody written by that person. So this is about Benjamin Franklin, written by him. So it's all stuff straight from the source. That's a primary source. This quote by Ronald Reagan, a very, very famous quote. Maybe not all this stuff, but you should have heard this before. Tear down this wall. That was a big moment in history. So any kind of quote from a person that came straight from Ronald Reagan's mouth when he was president. So that is a primary source. We have here some pictures. These are hieroglyphs from ancient Egypt that was carved by the Egyptians who were from that time period. That's a primary source. This is a letter from former President Barack Obama. So it's from the White House. It's signed by Barack Obama. This is his handwriting. That would be a primary source. It's from him, from that person. This is a picture of Amelia Earhart. She was a very famous pilot, disappeared. Don't know what happened to her. A few years ago, there was a documentary that came out suggesting that they actually found her on some sort of island, I think near Japan. I'm not really sure. But anyway, it's a picture. That is a primary source. It's from that time period. It's from her. It's of her. Secondary sources then. If primary is first, secondary is second. It's created after the event, and it's made by researching primary sources. So that's your history. So if you have a secondary source, that is from somebody who maybe wasn't there, somebody who learned about all this stuff that happened. Some examples are textbooks. A textbook is always a secondary source. Documentaries, that's a story about somebody. Biographies, stories about someone's life written by someone else. Those are all secondary sources. They had to learn that information before these things could be made, before the textbook could be written, before the documentary could be made, before the biography could be written. Those are all secondary sources. Some more examples here. Encyclopedias, those are secondary sources. A biography of Albert Einstein, that is a secondary source. It was written about Einstein by some other person. A world atlas, that is a secondary source. People didn't just decide that the earth was that way, they had to go study the earth. An almanac, that is a secondary source. You can see it's just got a bunch of stuff on here: Olympic stuff, presidential stuff, entertainment stuff. All of that had to be researched before it could be made. So that's it for notes for primary and secondary sources. It's pretty simple. Primary is firsthand, it's from that time period. Secondary is not. If you have any questions about that, let me know, and we'll be working on perfecting this in the next few days. Hope to see you guys soon.